later. And we're trying to set up a British Psychological Society section just for looking at male gender issues. We need 500 vote or expressions of interest to have a full vote ballot paper sent out to every member. We've got over 400 now, which is encouraging. We just need another 90 votes, and then we can, the British Psychological Society will put out a ballot paper for everyone to vote. And if 1% of psychologists in the country vote in favour, the section will be formed, so we're hopeful about that. I'll leave a bit of time at the end for you to speak to me, because obviously there's probably stuff you really want to question or think about with me. But the future, really, we've got to use masculinity, we've got to stop trying to tell people not to be masculine. We need to try and honour people's masculinity, design services for them, and use what we know about masculinity to make those services effective. So I have been going on about archetypes, but that doesn't mean to say I think all men are always going to be the same forever. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that all men are going to feel the need to protect, they're going to feel a pressure to be strong. So we need to help men think about being strong in a different way. We can't tell them not to be strong. We can't say, come on guys, it's okay to be vulnerable. That's not a message that will suit men very well. What we can say is if you seek help, you're being strong. A man that seeks help is actually taking responsibility, he's taking control, he's being strong. So why don't, oops, what I did there? What was that?
Just hit any of the keys.
Oh yeah, okay. So basically, we don't have to be too clever. All we have to do to say to men is, you are a man if you seek help. What we sort of say to men at the moment is stop being a man. What we need to say is stay being a man, but seeking help is strong, because you're taking control. We've got to use these rules and scripts to work for us. It's the same with women. If you want to help a woman, you don't say, don't worry about how you look, doesn't matter, stop being so feminine. What we need to be saying to women is there are many different ways to look beautiful. You don't have to have that body image. You don't have to have that size of figure or that colour hair, whatever. There are many beautiful ways to be female, but the pressure on women to be beautiful is in our species. We won't change that. But we can use it more creatively to put less pressure on girls to feel they've got to conform to a narrow image of beauty. And where people do that, it works. Same with men. We've got to stop telling them that it's okay to not, strength doesn't matter. That's just not going to work. We say, look, you are strong if you seek help. You'll get strong. You are doing something. I mean, I'm not saying, obviously, vulnerability. And by the way, when you do run a men's group, and you have a group of guys all round together, once they know that other men honour them when they open up, they do open up. So it's not like men aren't going to cry or open up. I'm not saying we shouldn't allow men to cry. I'm just saying the context in which we do it should honour their gender. And psychologists should be leading this. I mean, society is colluding with all this stuff. Psychologists, we're the people who we call ourselves the students of human nature, the human condition. We are supposed to be observing all these patterns in human behaviour and all these differences. Shouldn't we be pioneering new models and approaches for men, as for every other group? As I say, for women, for all people who have any differences, they need a service that designed to adapt to their experience. So male psychological life should be honoured and celebrated, and services should be designed that help men. We shouldn't be joining in with the chorus that browbeats men into hating their own gender. And of course, there is gender hatred, of women too, and I'm not saying there isn't. What I'm saying is that we've got to recognise that men have a gender. I don't think we even think men have a gender. It's sort of almost assumed they're just blokes, they just get on with their life. So I'm going to sort of stop there, because it gives us a few minutes perhaps to have a conversation, or we can ask questions, or make your own points and comments to because there's enough people here to have a meaningful discussion for a few minutes. So thank you for your attention.
Thank Thanks so much, Martin, for that. And it's really good to have such an expert in male psychology. I think Martin is probably the expert in the UK on male psychology. And I hope this lecture has inspired some interest and some thoughts. And you may well want to challenge Martin or any of us involved in male psychology on any of these ideas suggested tonight. So if anyone would like to ask any questions, please do so now.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. If your archetype about the male being generally or on average a provider and protector and that kind of leading to their role in the employment market, do you have any thoughts about why boys are underperforming at all through stages of school and indeed at university?
I'm sure there are other people who should might contribute, so I'll say what I think. It's a good question. It's possibly, observing my own son and other boys of his age, and there does seem to be a difference in behaviour at schools. And I know we've got Natasha and her team here who've been going into UK schools trying to help with mental health of all kids, probably got some thoughts on it, but I think there does seem to be a kind of a culture where the boys sort of feel it's almost not cool to work, and it's kind of, there's a bravado in some of the young guys, about the sort of school structure, the school environment seems to suit more the girls sort of somehow find it more able to focus and concentrate. The boys, I think, don't easily sit down for huge long periods and focus. I think that's, we've designed our schools around, I don't know, we designed them in the Victorian age maybe, and thought that schools should have a certain purpose, we're teaching things to sit there and we'll talk at you. I mean, this lecture's only gone on for an hour. You've probably had enough, however fascinating I might have been as a speaker, you probably starting to get to the point where you think, I've been sitting here for an hour. But I think for boys it's harder to, it sounds even a bit stupid, but we're just sitting still. We don't design lessons. There was a lovely programme on the telly where I think it's Gareth Malone, the choir chap, he sort of goes around setting up choirs, doesn't he, with everybody. Who knows where I'll go next to create a choir. But he took boys with low reading age in a primary school in Harlow just out into the fields and did all their reading outside in the trees, obviously when the weather was permitted. And the reading age went up. Now you could argue it's just because there's a guy from the telly, but I don't know how you factor in all this. Whenever anyone does any intervention on the telly, probably the telly is the big factor that makes people feel valued and, this is good, I'm going to try it. But nonetheless, it raises the hypothesis that if you were to teach boys physics in the skate park, you might get better results, do you know what I mean? Because they would learn about something physically.
But they did all right in, let's say, the Victorian age when people weren't really bothering to educate women, and as you say, it's broadly speaking the same education model, conquered around in a room with a teacher at the front.
I think there are factors around the way boys relate to girls in school and whether you should have I would probably suggest you had separate spaces for some of the learning, and then they come together at break times and social times. There's lots of, there are educational specialists who know much more about this than me, but those are the kind of thoughts I've had.
Just to interrupt, and hopefully this will answer some questions. Gilbert Stu is one of the experts on gender differences in education, and he's going to be speaking at the Male Psychology Conference here at UCL on, I think it's the 24th and 25th of June, Friday and Saturday. Blindness is somebody who's identified various ways in which men and boys and girls probably have different educational strengths. For example, my own research have found that men and boys have got a better ability at what's called mental rotation, which is kind of ability to sort of conceptualize objects rotated in space, which is the kind of thing you'd expect to see as a useful trait for engineers, for example. So it could explain why boys go on to have careers in engineering in later life. And also in SATs you have the kind of the non-verbal reasoning. And very much, well, some of these tasks are very much about this mental rotation ability. So I think that there's probably, unfortunately, very old-fashioned to say biological reasons why there might be differences in education for boys and girls. And I think what's happened is sometime in the 80s, in the effort to make sure that the girls didn't fall behind boys educationally, the whole curriculum was rejigged so that you had more things that favoured girls in terms of education. So fewer exams and more coursework, for example, is something that seems to tilt the balance away from boys doing so well in school. I hope that didn't deviate too much from there. Would anybody else like to ask a question?
Well, I just wanted to add, sorry about being late.
That's okay.
But I just wanted to add, given your question, I know how you just explained the education, psychology of education, but I teach at a boys' school, and I went to a girls' school, and I also went to a boys' school.
Right.
So I went to a lot of schools where there was single genders.
Yeah,
And,
sure.
and I find that the boys in my class and other classes often cry or thought of ugly. As in cry. As in the idea of physical violence is so disgusting to them that they actually would rather pretend to be sick than go to these sports activities. And it's something that is so reoccurring that a lot of the boys are actually in a sense the complete opposite of the gender stereotype that you kind of train. And another thing about the soldiers of war, during war, in the First World War, this kind of concept of the political sphere was dominated by males, and there were no females dominating at all. And so the only thing they could think of to fight that would be more males. So that's probably why the highest death toll was males, because it was a singular male sphere.
Oh, sure, it's still males. The point that you're making very good points, but obviously the combat deaths are still mainly male today, and deaths at work are 90% males, 97% male. So we still, as a society, kind of expect and tolerate the male doing sort of the difficult, dangerous work, as reflected in those figures. But obviously, that might not be a problem because some of those jobs might suit, obviously some where things aren't, the physical differences to the male and female aren't so relevant in society, but in some jobs they might be, and you might argue that that's a reasonable thing. But all the point I'm making is that we should be having that debate and raising that issue, as that gender issues should apply to male inequalities too. And obviously the figures, those figures for deaths at work, probably not many people, I don't know, who put your hands up if you're aware of that figure. Were you aware of that figure? So you were. Yeah. So the point is that there's no pressure in society to change that figure, which means that we kind of accept it. And maybe it is right to accept it, but we should accept it consciously. Whereas at the moment we're kind of accepting it unconsciously. We're not even thinking about it. That's all I meant. But your observations about boys' schools and girls' schools are very interesting. And of course, if you've been to both or taught in both, that gives you a perspective which is very, very useful on these matters. We're not standing here saying I've got the definitive answer. It was kind of hoping that we raise a little bit of light on this elephant, because the male gender is often not thought about. Men don't want to think about their gender, and women don't want to think about male gender very much, so nobody thinks about it. But the reason you're here is because you are, the people who are here in this room probably different from the average person. They actually thought, I'll go to that lecture.
So just before we go there, did you feel you were answered about the rugby player guys?
You want to say something?
No? Would you like to say something?
No, it's just that's not my experience, but I'm prepared to accept that you have a point. I would say that's interesting.
In my experience, there's always been, there's always been, when I was a schoolboy, there was the boys who didn't like to play football, the girls they hated all that stuff. I think that's, everyone's a bit different. It's there's not one type of man, it's a spectrum.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I was just saying the predominance.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't seen that in mind. So I was at a male boarding school years ago, I was my age, but I didn't observe that with rugby. but that might have changed in time. There might be some changes. These things, you know, what is changeable, what is universal, what is changeable, how cultures can express things differently. These are all important questions.
Hi, I'm really enjoying this debate. I was just wondering, we've touched on the working classes, but do you think, have there been any studies that have shown differences in gender inequalities across different social classes?
We just think about that.
Belinda, did you want to say something?
So it's quite a complicated question. I mean, I think that the class inequality is actually much more significant than gender inequality. I think if you're talking about disadvantaged groups, there's actually very little gender inequality. The issues of gender inequality are really, I would say, in this country, more a problem of the more privileged. So, you know, when you're talking very high status jobs where there are fewer women, if you talk about disadvantaged people, actually, I think there probably isn't that much difference. And I mean, the way that I see it is that a lot of the advantages which middle class women have actually comes from having a partner. They're very, very much more likely to be married. Whereas if you look at working classes, there's very little marriage, so there's very much high rates of single parenthood, and this probably creates, adds to the inequality, the class inequality between the two groups. So I think I would say gender inequality is really in this society, not in other societies, but it's very much a feature of the privileged.
Just to add to that, on the Titanic, just those kind of figures, if you break it all down by class, you get sort of the average survival rate for women was 70%, for men about 75 for women, 20 for men. But if you look at it class, you do get differences within gender between class. So you've got 8% of men travelling second class survive, about something like 30% of the first men travelling first class survive. So there's a class factor in there even in those days.
Yeah, and I mean, I should say actually, if you look at less well off, it's actually the men who are the most disadvantaged because they're not the ones who are getting the flats, and they're the ones who have the horrible jobs and they don't have access to benefits. So I mean, the whole thing would get reversed amongst disadvantaged groups.
We've got time for maybe one or two more questions.
Yeah. Thank you. And I have to say that we're really brilliant. Someone who helps run format, and those observations are really quite telling, and I'll be certainly taking those back to the team. Just in terms of the debate within the British psychology and the issue about not being able to look at these issues from a gendered perspective, what is actually driving that? I mean, why is it difficult for psychologists in Britain to actually not look at these issues from a male or female perspective? Is it an issue of political correctness? Is it that men and women, female psychologists who wouldn't study this are perhaps being scared off?